Hello, I am now starting a new series on Sartre's Existentialism is a Humanism, a wonderful essay that very nicely introduces what existentialism is. Now, I'm not going to, at least not today, do a detailed overview of what is existentialism and who's Sartre, who is Camus, and what does Heidegger and what do Nietzsche and Kierkegaard have to do with it, and making all those distinctions. I still don't know what that background noise is. Something about the air conditioning systems or something, I guess, but that noise has no connection to the air conditioner being on or off that I can tell. Anyway, this is Sartre's speech from 1946, or lecture, introducing what is existentialism. And it's a really good introduction to existentialism, and it's very readable. And it's not like that other thing by Sartre. Sartre's On Being and Nothingness. Now, it's a big book that's not very readable. This is very, very readable and highly recommended reading. Now, I'm going to be using the translation that's on the internet by Philip Myritt. And I think I might take 2 or 3 videos to get through this, but we'll see. Sartre says, "My purpose here is to offer a defense of existentialism against several reproaches that have been laid against it." That's straightforward enough. He's going to respond to some objections. And then he goes over some of the objections before he says anything else. Now, as often happens in philosophy, like Mill's utilitarianism is a superb example, objections to your view can be a very useful opportunity for developing and clarifying your view. That's what Sartre is doing here. But let's look at the objections first. First, it has been reproached as an invitation to people to dwell in quietism of despair, etc., etc. This is especially the reproach made by the communists. Quietism means giving up, more or less. For another quarter, we are reproached for having underlined all that is ignominious in the human situation, for depicting what is mean, sordid, or base, etc., the neglect of certain things that possess charm and beauty and belong to the brighter side of human nature, etc. The existentialists have been accused of being terribly pessimistic. From the Christian side, we are reproached as people who deny the reality and seriousness of human affairs. For since we ignore the commandments of God and all values prescribed as eternal, nothing remains but what is strictly voluntary. So the Christians have criticized existentialism for denying the reality and seriousness of human affairs by denying any divine or eternal values. "It is to these various reproaches that I shall endeavor to reply today," says Sartre. "That is why I've entitled this brief exposition, Existentialism is a Humanism, etc. Existentialism is a doctrine that does render human life possible, etc. The essential charge laid against us is, of course, that of overemphasis upon the evil side of human life, etc." So basically, Sartre is a French philosopher, 1900s. He's introducing the tradition in philosophy that is called existentialism. And in this lecture titled Existentialism is a Humanism, he's going over several objections to existentialism that center on it being allegedly too pessimistic. And he's going to respond by explaining that existentialism is optimistic and it's a humanism. But the first thing to do is explain what the heck is it? There's a long section I'll skip. There's a very long paragraph here. And he asks the essential question, what then is this that we call existentialism? So what is existentialism anyway? That's the important thing. I reckon in this video I'll probably give his brief answer to this and then stop. The question is only complicated because there are 2 kinds of existentialists. He makes a distinction between Christian and atheist existentialists. And he'll say in a little bit that atheistic existentialism is more consistent, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. What the existentialists, he says, have in common is simply the fact that they believe that existence comes before essence, or if you will, that we must begin by the subjective. And then Sartre very sensibly says, what exactly do we mean by that? Because, of course, normal people read existence comes before essence, and they have no idea what it's talking about. I keep telling my students, that doesn't mean existence is more important than essence. It's actually the opposite. It means one of them happens first. This is priority in order of time, not priority in order of what's most important. Existence happens first, and then essence happens later. If one considers an article of manufacture, for example, a book or a paper knife, or I shall say a pen, we see that it has been made by an artisan who had a conception of it. And he has paid attention equally to the conception and to the pre-existent technique of production, which is a part of that conception, etc. One cannot suppose that a man would produce a paper knife or a pen without knowing what it was for. You can't make a pen without knowing what it's for. Let us say then of the paper knife that its essence, that is to say the sum of the formulae and the qualities which made its production and its definition possible, precedes its essence. All right, so the essence of a pen is what it's for. And you can't make the pen without knowing what it's for. That means the essence of a pen existed before the pen existed. The essence of the pen, what it's for, its function was there before it was there. When we think of God as the creator, we are thinking of him most of the time as a supernal artisan. So when we think of God as the creator, we are thinking of God as having designed us in like manner. A human intelligence designed this pen. Human intelligence had in mind the nature, the essence, the function, the purpose of the pen. All of these things were there in the mind of the person who made the pen, even before the pen was made. And the essence of the pen, therefore, happened first. And then the pen itself came into existence later in accordance with that essence. And when we think of God as creator, that's how we think of us. We think of God as having given us our function, our purpose, our essence, and then created us. And so our essence was there before we were there. Now, this is not Sartre's view. This is the view he's disagreeing with. This is the view he's saying is not correct. So he says atheistic existentialism, which he represents, is more consistent in saying there is no God and we don't have this sort of we don't have this design and purpose built in even before we come into existence. We come into existence first, and then later we get to discover or invent our purpose. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's see how he says it. If God does not exist, there is at least one being whose existence comes before its essence, whose existence happens first and then his essence happens later. A being which exists before it can be defined by any conception of it. That being is man. Or as Heidegger has it, the human reality, or these days we would say humanity or human beings. What do we mean by saying that existence precedes essence? We mean that man first of all exists, encounters himself, surges up in the world, and defines himself afterwards. If man, as the existentialist sees him, is not definable, it is because, to begin with, he is nothing. He will not be anything until later, and then he will be what he makes of himself. Thus there is no human nature because there is no God to have a conception of it. Man simply is, etc. He is what he wills, etc. Man is nothing else but that which he makes of himself. That is the first principle of existentialism. A human being is nothing but what that human being makes of himself or herself. That is the first principle of existentialism. Man is responsible. A human being is responsible for what he is. And I better stop there, but paraphrase before going any further. How can I paraphrase this? Sartre is saying that the existentialist view is that human beings come into existence before their purpose does. We begin to exist without any purpose. We come into this world without any purpose. Man, first of all, exists, encounters himself, surges up in the world, and defines himself afterwards. We do not have a purpose until we invent it for ourselves. That's the philosophy of existentialism. Now, please understand, this is not nihilism. Nihilism is the philosophy that says there's no purpose in life and life is meaningless. Existentialism is the philosophy that says there's no pre-existing purpose and we begin to exist and then later we get to discover our purpose, or more precisely, in Sartre's existentialism, we create our own purpose. We decide what is going to be our purpose. And one distinctive characteristic of existentialism is we decide on an individual basis. However, Sartre is going to explain how that is relevant to other people. Hey, you have some sort of communal responsibility in this. Let's see if I can then summarize this in 2 sentences and shut up. The official definition of existentialism is more or less given here in Existentialism is a Humanism by Jean-Paul Sartre, French philosopher, 1900s, who says existentialism is the thesis that existence happens first and then essence happens later, which means we begin to exist before we have any purpose for our lives, and we get to figure out that purpose later after we begin existing. And we are responsible for creating our own purposes in life. Thus saith Sartre, and there's a lot more fun stuff where that came from to be considered in future videos. Thanks for watching.